Are you like me and struggling to get up hills on your gravel ride? Do you also shift and then go, I wish there was one more easier gear to go up this hill? For that reason, I am making this video to talk about some of the options available for drivetrains on the gravel rides. I will be looking at SRAM in 1x configuration only because I'm a big fan of 1x drivetrain, being a mountain biker at heart. Trek claims the Checkpoint Gen 3 is their adventure gravel bike, but in my opinion, I hope your adventure doesn't have too many steep hills, cause the current drivetrain is simply not good enough for most riders and areas where big climbs will be part of your ride, like in Colorado, Vermont, les Laurentides, Quebec, and more. My SL5 variant of the Checkpoint Gen 3 comes with a 40-tooth chainring and 1144 cassette in the Apex tier of the SRAM Explorer family. I will compare my current setup to the three options I suggest, which greatly vary in price. Please note that for the top speed, I'm using a 100 RPM cadence, and for climbing, I'm using gear inches to compare the differences. Tire size chosen is comparable since I'm going to be using the same, my Continental Race King 2.2, which measure at 54mm wide on my Easton EC90 ALX wheels. We could change the front chainring for a 36-tooth, which will make the 44-tooth cassette easier to use for climbing at 23.7 gear inches compared to 26.3, but that will come to the detriment of the top speed on the smallest cog. My top speed would be around 46 kilometers an hour, but the climbing would be greatly improved. Now let's relate that to the needs for most riders. In the rides that I do and the events that I have participated in the past, what I see is a big load of riders having a hard time climbing up hills, myself included. I feel media is talking more to the advanced/pro riders and not to the common rider like myself. I want to climb easier, and on descents, I'll just chill, rest my legs, and ride while not using the brakes if possible. I don't need to pedal to try to squeeze the most speed out of the descents, but I do need help to climb. This is why I don't care much about the top speed with my gearing setup. Also, I'm not the strongest or fittest rider, so I'm not capable of maintaining a 32-35 km speed average on my gravel rides. My averages are more between 20 to 25 kilometers an hour. It's important to know that for the setup number 2 and number 3, your bike needs to be UDH compatible to use the SRAM T-type transmission. If that's not the case for your bike, you will need to use the non-T-type AXS mountain bike drivetrain, which are still available. Also, your wheels will need to be equipped with an XDR hub driver to install the cassettes. With SRAM AXS, the ease of using mountain bike cassette and derailleur is something that SRAM beautifully executed. This is referred to the Mullet setup in the bike industry. Many top world gravel racers actually use this setup for their gravel races like Unbound, Big Sugar, and many more. Here's the setup I personally recommend. SRAM GX T-type cassette with a SRAM GX T-type derailleur and a SRAM T-type XO chain to use with your AXS levers on your Trek checkpoint. This is not the lightest setup out there for the weight weenies. SRAM makes the XXSL variant of the T-type transmission to save maximum of weight on the bike. I personally don't have the funds for that transmission, but if you want to help me out, maybe by sharing my content, liking the channel, stuff like that, maybe in a couple of years, I could maybe afford it. Now back to the Mullet drivetrain. Why the XO chain and not the GX chain? The XO chain has a hardening treatment which gives it a longer life, so that's totally worth the extra money. With this setup, the climbing aspect of your gravel bike would vastly be improved at 20 gear inches, and the top speed would also be improved since these cassettes are 10 tooth at the smallest cog, which doesn't matter to me, but it might to you. A 1.8mm spacer is needed to mount a mountain bike XD cassette to an XDR driver. Make sure you keep that when you buy your new wheels. Now this is the comparison between setup number 1, 36-tooth chainring, 1144 cassette versus setup number 2, 42 chainring and 1052 cassette. Now let's talk about the last drivetrain setup possibility with SRAM at the time of recording this video. The last but not inexpensive setup is the SRAM Red Explorer drivetrain. That amazing crafted and light cassette, which is 13 speed by the way, with more closely gapped gears in the bottom of the cassette to give you more steady cadence jumps, is 1046 tooth. So there's a small advantage on the top and bottom end of the cassette. But the magic of this setup, other than emptying your bank account, is when you made it to a 36-tooth chainring, which gives about the same range as the Mullet drivetrain, but lighter. Between the three options discussed, which setup will I use for the 2025 season? Take a good guess in the comments below. So did you write your guess in the comments yet? My setup will be SRAM AXS Apex levers and derailleur that came on my Trek Checkpoint Gen 3 SL5 with a North Shore billet 36-tooth chainring and a SRAM Force 1044 cassette on my new wheels that are equipped with an XDR driver. If this setup doesn't fit my needs during my 2025 season, I'll be making an update video in 2026 about my new drivetrain setup and explain why I changed it. So what drivetrain do you use? Do you think bike manufacturers should offer a Mullet setup built on their gravel bike right from the get-go? So I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.